नारायण गोसाई महाराज श्री गुरुदेव की जय। नितिल प्रविष्टम विष्णुपाद अष्टतर शतश्माद श्री भक्तिवेदांत वामन गोसाई महाराज की जय। नितिल प्रविष्टम विष्णुपाद अष्टतर शतश्माद श्री भक्तिवेदांत स्वामी महाराज श्री प्रभुपाद की जय। नितिल प्रविष्टम विष्णुपाद अष्टतर शतश्माद श्री भक्ति प्रज्ञान केशव गोसाई महाराज की जय। नितिल प्रविष्टम विष्णुपाद अष्टतर शतश्माद श्रील भक्ति सिद्धांत सरस्वती गोसाई प्रभुपाद की जय। नितिल प्रविष्ट महाभागवत श्री गोक्षरस बाबूजी महाराज की जय। नितिल प्रविष्ट श्री सच्चिदानंद भक्ति विनोद ठाकुर की जय। नितिल प्रविष्ट वैष्णव सार्वभौम श्री जगन्नाथ दास बाबूजी महाराज की जय। श्री रूपनु गौरी गुरु वर्ग की जय। श्री रूप सनातन भट्ट रघुनाथ श्री जीव गोपाल पतदास रघुनाथ शार गोसाई प्रभु की जय। श्री स्वरूप दामोदर राय रामानंदारी श्री गोपाल वृंद की जय। नाम अचय श्री हरिदास ठाकुर की जय। प्रेम से कहो श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासरी गौर भक्त वृंद की जय। श्री क्षेत्र मंडल गौर मंडल ब्रज मंडल मथुरा वृंदावन धाम की जय। सार्व अभिष्ट प्रदात गिरिराज महाराज की जय। श्री राधा कुंड श्याम कुंड की जय। श्री यमुना देवी गंगा देवी की जय। श्री तुलसी महारानी वृंद देवी की जय। श्री भक्ति देवी की जय। श्री पूर्णमासी योगमाया की जय। श्री गोपेश्वर महादेव की जय। श्री अकारशी तिथि की जय। इंदिरा अकारशी तिथि की जय। अकारशी तिथि कारी समस्त भक्त वृंद की जय। श्री हरि नाम संकीर्तन की जय। अनंत कोटि वैष्णव वृंद की जय। समागत गौर भक्त वृंद की जय। श्री निताय गौर प्रेमानंदे हरि हरि बोल। ओम ज्ञानतिमिरान्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरुवे नमः। नमो ॐ विष्णुपदाय राधिकाय प्रियात्मने श्रीमद्भक्तिवेदान्त नारायणीति नामिने। नमो ॐ विष्णुपदाय कृष्णपृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्त स्वामिनिति नामिने। वंशकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्य एव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। नमो महावदन्याय कृष्णप्रेमप्रदायते कृष्णाय कृष्णचैतन्य नाम्ने गौरतिषे नमः। गुरुवे गौरचन्द्राय राधिकाय तदालये कृष्णाय कृष्णभक्ताय तद्भक्ताय नमो नमः। यं प्रव्रजन्तम् अनुपेतमपेतकृत्यं द्वैपायनो विरहकातर आजुहाव पुत्रेति तन्मयतया तरवोऽभिनेदुस्तं सर्वभूत हृदयं मुनिमानतोऽस्मि। नारायणं नमस्कृत्य नरं चैव नरोत्तमं देवीं सरस्वतीं व्यासं ततो जयमुदीरयेत्। शृण्वतं स्वकथा कृष्ण पुण्यश्रवणकीर्तन हृदन्तस्थो ह्यभद्राणि विधुनोति सुहृत्सतम्। नष्टप्रायेष्वभद्रेषु नित्यं भगवत सेवया भगवत्युत्तमश्लोके भक्तिर्भवति नैष्टिकी। तवैवास्मि न जीवामि त्वया विना इति विज्ञाय राधे त्वां नायमां चरणान्तिकम्। भक्त्या विहीन अपराधलक्षाय क्षिप्ताष्टकामादितराङ्गमध्ये कृपामयि त्वं शरणं प्रपन्ना वृन्दे नमस्ते चरणारविन्दम्। भज श्रीकृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानन्द श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासरि गौर भक्तवृंद। हरे कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्णा हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे। Dandavat Pranams Gargaraji, Ganga Didi, Indira Mataji, Prajumna Prabhu, Rup Manjari Didi, and Raseshwari Mataji, she'll be watching later on. Dandavat Pranams to all of you. Hari Bol. All right, so now we will be reading chapter 17. I made a mistake in the title there. I accidentally wrote 117 verses 1 to 20. I'll have to fix that after. Anyhow, so one second. Let me just open up just so we can see what we read yesterday. What verses did we read yesterday? I'm just checking really quick. We read from 49 to 65. Okay. Sorry, one second. Okay. So the Jiva speaks to Citraketu Maharaj, the child's funeral rites, the queen's atonement, Narad's instructions to Citraketu. Citraketu attains the Lord's darshan, and then Citraketu's prayers to the Lord. And then yesterday we read the Lord's response to the prayers of Citraketu. So let's just go over those the Lord's response. 49. Where is that? Okay. So Anantadev, being very pleased with the prayers offered by Citraketu, the king of the Vidyadharas, replied to him as follows. By the instructions of Narad and Angira, you have gained transcendental knowledge and are able to see me. I am the source and soul of all beings who are my expansions. Scripture, or the transcendental vibrations of the impersonal Brahman or the deity, are my eternal forms. The jiva thinks he is the enjoyer of this world, and the world is expanded as a source of enjoyment for the jiva. Both are produced by me, pervaded by me, and thus rest in me. The wakefulness, dreaming, and deep sleep states of the jiva are but energies of the Supreme Lord. One should therefore remember the original creator of these states, the Supreme Lord, who is unaffected by them. Know me to be the all-pervading Supersoul through whom a sleeping person can understand his dreaming condition and his happiness beyond the activities of the material senses. I am the cause of activities of the living entity. The living entity is Brahman in quality and is part of the Lord, the Supreme Brahman. Thus, both the living entity and the Lord are knowers of the activities of dreams and wakeful states. Forgetfulness causes transmigration. When a jiva thinks himself different from me, forgetting his spiritual identity of qualitative oneness with me, then his conditional life begins, and he takes body after body and death after death. Human birth, especially in the land of India, facilitates Vedic knowledge and its practical realization. In such a position, if one does not attain self-realization, it is not possible in any other position. Freedom through bhakti. Remembering the great misery and fruit of activities, which brings results opposite to those desires, and knowing a fearless condition arising from action free from desires, a wise man should cease from material desires. Okay. A husband and wife work to get happiness and mitigate distress, but it never happens because they are full of desires. One should become a devotee by understanding that karma produces opposite results, knowing that self-realization is beyond the wakeful, dreaming, and deep sleep states. One should become a devotee by freeing oneself from sense objects seen and heard by one's discrimination, and by being satisfied with Vedic knowledge and practical application. Humans, by their intelligence fixed in the process of bhakti yoga, must understand with all their efforts the Lord and the jiva, who are one in quality. Param Atma Ekam Darshanam. O King, by accepting my instruction and gaining my transcendental knowledge and realization, you will achieve me at the end of life. After thus instructing Citraketu, the Supreme Lord Sankarshan disappeared from that place as Citraketu looked on. And so today we're going to be reading the first three parts of this 17th chapter. Citraketu laughs at Lord Śiva, Mother Parvati chastises and curses Citraketu, and Citraketu speaks to Mother Parvati. That's the topics for today. So where is it? 1 second. Oh, shoot. Let me, 6th canto. 1 second, guys. Sorry about this. 17. The 17th chapter is summarized as follows. This chapter describes Citraketu's receiving the body of an asura, or demon, because of joking with Lord Śiva. After personally talking with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, King Citraketu enjoyed life in his airplane with the women of the Vidyadhara planet. Engaging in the congregational chanting of the glories of the Lord, he began flying his airplane and traveling in outer space. One day, while traveling like this, he wandered into the bowers of Sumeru mountain, where he came upon Lord Śiva embracing Parvati, surrounded by an assembly of siddhas, charanas, and great sages. Seeing Lord Śiva in that situation, Citraketu laughed very loudly, but Parvati became angry at him and cursed him. Because of this curse, Citraketu later appeared as the demon Vitrasura. Citraketu, however, was not at all afraid of Parvati's curse, and thus he spoke as follows. Everyone in human society enjoys happiness and distress according to his past deeds, and in this way travels in the material world. Therefore, no one is responsible for his happiness and distress. One is controlled by the influence of material nature in the material world, yet one thinks himself the doer of everything. In this material world, which is made of the external energy of the Supreme Lord, one is sometimes cursed and sometimes favored, and thus he sometimes enjoys in the upper planetary systems and sometimes suffers in the lower planets. But all these situations are the same because they are within this material world. None of these positions has any factual existence, for all of them are temporary. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is the ultimate controller because the material world is created, maintained, and annihilated under his control, while he nonetheless remains neutral to these different transformations of the material world in time and space. The material external energy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is in charge of this material world. The Lord helps the world by creating situations for the living entities within it. When Citraketu spoke in this way, all the members in the great assembly in which Lord Śiva and Parvati were present were astonished. Then Lord Śiva began speaking about the devotees of the Lord. A devotee is neutral in all conditions of life, whether in the heavenly planets or hellish planets, whether liberated from the material world or conditioned by it, and whether blessed with happiness or subjected to distress. These are all merely dualities created by the external energy. Being influenced by the external energy, the living entity accepts a gross and subtle material body, and in this illusory position, he apparently suffers miseries, although everyone is part and parcel of the Supreme Lord. The so-called demigods consider themselves independent lords, and in this way, they are misled from understanding that all living entities are part of the Supreme. This chapter concludes by glorifying the devotee and the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Shri Shuka Uvacha Yataschantar hiton nantas tasya kritva dishe nama vidhadharash chitraketush chachara gagane chara. Srila Shukadev Goswami said, after offering obeisances to the direction from which Ananta, the Supreme Personality of Godhead had disappeared, Citraketu began traveling in outer space as the head of the Vidyadharas. Salaksham Vashalakshanam Avyahata Balendriya Stuyamano Mahayogi Munibi Siddhacharanai Kula Chalendra Dronishu Nana Sankalpa Siddhishu Reme Vidhadhara Stribhir Gapayan Harim Ishvaram. Being praised by great sages and saints, and by the inhabitants of Siddhaloka and Charanaloka, Citraketu, the most powerful mystic yogi, wandered about enjoying life for millions of years. With bodily strength and senses free from deterioration, he traveled within the valleys of Sumeru mountain, which is the place of perfection for various kinds of mystic power. In those valleys, he enjoyed life with the women of Vidyadharaloka by chanting the glories of the Supreme Lord Hari. Purport. It is to be understood that Maharaj Citraketu, although surrounded by beautiful women from Vidyadharaloka, did not forget to glorify the Lord by chanting the holy name of the Lord. It has been proved in many places that one who is not contaminated by any material condition, who is a pure devotee engaged in chanting the glories of the Lord, should be understood to be perfect. Ekada savimanena Vishnu dattena bhasvata Girishang tadrishe gachan paritang siddhacharanai Alingyanki kritam devim bahuna muni sangsadi Uvacha devya shrinvantya jahaso chaistarantike. One time, while King Chitraketu was traveling in outer space on a brilliantly effulgent airplane given to him by Lord Vishnu, he saw Lord Shiva surrounded by siddhas and charanas. Lord Shiva was sitting in an assembly of great saintly persons and embracing Parvati on his lap with his arm. Citraketu laughed loudly and spoke within the hearing of Parvati. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says in this connection, Bhaktim bhutim harir dattva swaviche danu bhutaye devya shapena vitratvam nitva tang swantike nayat. The purport is that the Supreme Personality of Godhead wanted to bring Citraketu to Vaikuntha Loka as soon as possible. The Lord's plan was that Citraketu be cursed by Parvati to become Vitrasura so that in his next life he could quickly return home back to Godhead. There have been many instances in which a devotee acting as a demon has been brought to the kingdom of God by the mercy of the Lord. For Parvati to be embraced by Lord Shiva was natural in a relationship between husband and wife. This was nothing extraordinary for Citraketu to see. Nonetheless, Citraketu laughed loudly to see Lord Shiva in that situation, even though he should have not done so. Thus, he was eventually cursed, and this curse was the cause of his returning home back to Godhead. Yeah, because I think that Shiva was in that position with Parvati in front of all these sages, which is just, yeah. Citraketuruvacha Esha loka guru shakshad dharmang bhakta sharirinam aste mukhya sabhayang vai mithuni bhuya bharyaya. Citraketu said, Lord Shiva, the spiritual master of the general populace, is the best of all living entities who have accepted material bodies. He enunciates the system of religion. Yet, how wonderful it is that he is embracing his wife Parvati in the midst of an assembly of great saintly persons. Jatadharastiva trapa brahmavadi sabhapati ankikritya striyam chaste gata hri prakrito yata. Lord Shiva, whose hair is matted on his head, has certainly undergone great austerities and penances. Indeed, he is the president in the assembly of strict followers of Vedic principles. Nonetheless, he is seated with his wife on his lap in the midst of saintly persons and is embracing her as if he were a shameless, ordinary human being. Purport. Citraketu appreciated the exalted position of Lord Shiva, and therefore he remarks at how wonderful it was that Lord Shiva was acting like an ordinary human being. He appreciated Lord Shiva's position, but when he saw Lord Shiva sitting in the midst of saintly persons and acting like a shameless, ordinary man, he was astonished. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur remarks that although Citraketu criticized Lord Shiva, he did not offend Lord Shiva like Daksha. Daksha considered Lord Shiva insignificant, but Citraketu expressed his wonder at Lord Shiva's being situated in that way. Prayasha prakritaschapi striyang rahasi bibhrati ayang mahavrata dharo bibharti sadasi striyam. Ordinary conditioned persons generally embrace their wives and enjoy their company in solitary places. How wonderful it is that Lord Mahadev, although a great master of austerity, is embracing his wife openly in the midst of an assembly of great saints. Purport. The word Mahavratadhara indicates a brahmachari who has never fallen down. Lord Shiva is counted among the best of yogis, yet he embraced his wife in the midst of great saintly persons. Citraketu appreciated how great Lord Shiva was to be unaffected even in that situation. Therefore, Citraketu was not an offender. He merely expressed his wonder. Shri Shuka uvacha Bhagavanapi tachrutva prahasyagadadhir nripa tushnim bhabhuva sadhasi sabhyaschatar anuvrata. Interesting here, Shrutva means hearing, so Bhagavan must be referring to Lord Shiva here. Tat Shutra, hearing that Bhagavan, like that. Interesting. Srila Shukadeva Goswami continued, My dear king, after hearing Citraketu's statement, Lord Shiva, the most powerful personality whose knowledge is fathomless, simply smiled and remained silent. All the members of the assembly followed the Lord by not saying anything. Purport. Citraketu's purpose in criticizing Lord Shiva is somewhat mysterious and cannot be understood by a common man. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, however, has made the following observations. Lord Shiva, being the most exalted Vaishnav and one of the most perfect demigods, is able to do anything he desires. Although he was externally exhibiting the behavior of a common man and not following etiquette, such actions cannot diminish his exalted position. The difficulty is that a common man, seeing Lord Shiva's behavior, might follow his example, as stated in Bhagavad Gita 3.21. Yad yad acharati shreshtas tatad eve taro jana sayat pramanam kurute lokastad anuvartate. Whatever action a great man performs, common men follow. And whatever standard he sets by exemplary acts, all the world pursues. A common man might also criticize Lord Shiva, like Daksha, who suffered the consequences for his criticism. King Citraketu desired that Lord Shiva cease this external behavior so that others might be saved from criticizing him and thus becoming offenders. If one thinks that Vishnu, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is the only perfect personality, whereas the demigods, even such demigods as Lord Shiva, are inclined toward improper social affairs, he is an offender. Considering all this, King Citraketu was somewhat harsh in his behavior with Lord Shiva. Lord Shiva, who is always deep in knowledge, could understand Citraketu's purpose, and therefore he was not at all angry. Rather, he simply smiled and remained silent. The members of the assembly surrounding Lord Shiva could also understand Citraketu's purpose. Consequently, following the behavior of Lord Shiva, they did not protest. Instead, following their master, they remained silent. If the members of the assembly thought that Citraketu had blasphemed Lord Shiva, they would certainly have left at once, blocking their ears with their hands. Ittatar viravidushi bruvane bhavashobhanam rushaha devi drishtaya nirjitatma bhimanine. Not knowing the prowess of Lord Shiva and Parvati, Citraketu strongly criticized them. His statements were not at all pleasing, and therefore the goddess Parvati, being very angry, spoke as follows to Citraketu, who thought himself better than Lord Shiva in controlling the senses. Purport. Although Citraketu never meant to insult Lord Shiva, he should have not criticized the Lord, even though the Lord was transgressing social customs. It is said, Tejiyasam nadoshaya. One who is very powerful should be understood to be faultless. For example, one should not find faults with the sun, although it evaporates urine from the street. The most powerful cannot be criticized by an ordinary man, or even by a great personality. Citraketu should have known that Lord Shiva, although sitting in that way, was not to be criticized. The difficulty was that Citraketu, having become a great devotee of Lord Vishnu, Sankarshan, was somewhat proud at having achieved Lord Sankarshan's favor, and therefore thought that he could now criticize anyone, even Lord Shiva. This kind of pride in a devotee is never tolerated. A Vaishnav should always remain very humble and meek, and offer respect to others. Trinarapi sunichena tarorapi sahishnuna amanina manadena kirtaniya sadahari. One should chant the holy name of the Lord in a humble state of mind, thinking oneself lower than a straw on the street. One should become more tolerant than a tree, devoid of all sense of false prestige, and ready to offer all respect to others. In such a state of mind, one can chant the holy name of the Lord constantly. A Vaishnav should not try to minimize anyone else's position. It is better to remain humble and meek and chant the Hare Krishna mantra. The word Nirjitatma Bhimanine indicates that Citraketu thought himself a better controller of the senses than Lord Shiva, although actually he was not. Because of all these considerations, Mother Parvati was somewhat angry at Citraketu. Shri Parvati vacha Ayam kim adhuna loke shasta danda dhara prabhu asmar vidhanam dushtanam nirlajanam chavi prakrit. The goddess Parvati said, "Alas, has this upstart now received a post from which to punish shameless persons like us? Has he been appointed ruler, carrier of the rod of punishment? Is he now the only master of everything?" Na Veda Dharmam Kila Parmayonir, na Brahmaputra Bhrigunaradadhya, na Vaikumara Kapila Manuscha, Yeno Nishedhantativartinam Haram. Alas, Lord Brahma, who has taken his birth from the lotus flower, does not know the principles of religion, nor do the great saints like Bhrigu and Narad, nor the 4 Kumaras headed by Sanat Kumar. Manu and Kapila have also forgotten the religious principles. I suppose it is to be because of this that they have not tried to stop Lord Shiva from behaving improperly. Whoa, those are quite cutting words. Esham anudheya padabja yugmam jagar guru mangala mangalang swayam Yakshatra bandhu paribhuhya surin prashasti drishtastar ayang hidandya. This Citraketu is the lowest of Kshatriyas, for he has impudently overridden Brahma and the other demigods by insulting Lord Shiva, upon whose lotus feet they always meditate. Lord Shiva is personified religion and the spiritual master of the entire world, and therefore Citraketu must be punished. Purport. All the members of the assembly were exalted Brahmins and self-realized souls, but they did not say anything about the conduct of Lord Shiva, who was embracing the goddess Parvati on his lap. Citraketu nonetheless criticized Lord Shiva, and therefore the opinion of Parvati was that he should be punished. Nayam arhati vaikunta pada molopasarpanam sambhavita mati stabdha sadhuge paripasitam. This person is puffed up because of his achievements, thinking, I am the best. He does not deserve to approach the shelter of Lord Vishnu's lotus feet, which are worshipped by all saintly persons, for he is impudent, thinking himself greatly important. Purport. If a devotee thinks that he is very much advanced in devotional service, he is considered puffed up and unfit to sit beneath the shelter of the Lord's lotus feet. Again, this instruction by Lord Chaitanya is applicable. Trinarapi sunichena tarorapi sahishrana amanina manadena kirtaneya sadahari. One should chant the holy name of the Lord in a humble state of mind, thinking oneself lower than the straw in the street. One should be more tolerant than a tree, devoid of all sense of false prestige, and ready to offer all respect to others. In such a state of mind, one can chant the holy name of the Lord constantly. Unless one is humble and meek, one cannot qualify to sit at the lotus feet of the Lord. Ata papi yasim yonim asurim yahi dormate yateha bhuya mahatam na karta putra kilbisham. O impudent one, my dear son, now take birth in a low, sinful family of demons, so that you will not commit such an offense again toward exalted, saintly persons in this world. Purport. One should be very careful not to commit offenses at the lotus feet of Vaishnavas, of whom Lord Shiva is the best. While instructing Srila Rupa Goswami, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu described an offense at the lotus feet of a Vaishnava as Hati Mata, a mad elephant. When a mad elephant enters a nice garden, it spoils the entire garden. Similarly, if one becomes like a mad elephant and commits offenses at the lotus feet of a Vaishnava, his entire spiritual career is halted. One should therefore be very careful not to commit offenses at the lotus feet of a Vaishnava. Mother Parvati was justified in punishing Citraketu, for Citraketu impudently criticized the Supreme Father Mahadev, who is the father of the living entities conditioned within this material world. The goddess Durga is called Mother, and Lord Shiva is called Father. A pure Vaishnava should be very careful to engage in his specific duty without criticizing others. This is the safest position. Otherwise, if one tends to criticize others, he may commit the great offense of criticizing a Vaishnava. Because Citraketu was undoubtedly a Vaishnava, he might have been surprised that Parvati had cursed him. Therefore, the goddess Parvati addressed him as Putra, a son. Everyone is the son of Mother Durga, but she is not an ordinary mother. As soon as there is a small discrepancy in a demon's behavior, Mother Durga immediately punishes the demon so that he may come to his senses. This is explained by Lord Krishna in Bhagavad Gita 7:14. Daiviyesha gunamayi mama maya duratyaya mam eva ye prapadyante mayam etang tarantite. This divine energy of mind, consisting of the three modes of material nature, is difficult to overcome, but those who have surrendered unto me can easily cross beyond it. To surrender to Krishna means to surrender to his devotees also, for no one can be a proper servant of Krishna unless he is a proper servant of a devotee. Charya Vaishnava Seva nistara paeche keva. Without serving a servant of Krishna, one cannot be elevated to being a servant of Krishna himself. Srila Prabhupada quotes this so often. Therefore, Mother Parvati spoke to Citraketu exactly like a mother who says to her naughty child, "My dear child, I am punishing you so that you won't do anything like this again." This tendency of a mother to punish her child is found even in Mother Yashoda, who became the mother of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Mother Yashoda punished Krishna by binding him and showing him a stick. Thus, it is the duty of a mother to chastise her beloved son, even in the case of the Supreme Lord. It is to be understood that Mother Durga was justified in punishing Citraketu. This punishment was a boon to Citraketu, because after taking birth as the demon Vitrasura, he was promoted directly to Vaikuntha. Shri Shuka Uvacha Evam Shaptash Citraketur Vimanar Avaruhyasa Prasadayam Asa Satim Murdhna Namrena Bharata. Shri Shukadev Goswami continued, My dear King Parikshit, when Citraketu was cursed by Parvati, he descended from his airplane, bowed before her with great humility, and pleased her completely. Citraketuruvacha Pratigrinami te shapam atmanonjali nambike dever martyaya yat proktam purvadishtam hitasya tat. Citraketu said, My dear mother, with my own hands folded together, I accept the curse upon me. I do not mind the curse, for happiness and distress are given by the demigods as a result of one's past deeds. Purport. Since Citraketu was a devotee of the Lord, he was not at all disturbed by the curse of Mother Parvati. He knew very well that one suffers or enjoys the results of one's past deeds as ordained by Daiva Netra, superior authority, or the agents of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He knew that he had not committed any offense at the lotus feet of Lord Shiva or the goddess Parvati, yet he had been punished, and this means that the punishment had been ordained. Thus the king did not mind it. A devotee is naturally so humble and meek that he accepts any condition of life as a blessing from the Lord. Tateno kampam susamikshamano, Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam 10:14-8. A devotee always accepts punishment from anyone as the mercy of the Lord. If one lives in this conception of life, he sees whatever reverses occur to be due to his past misdeeds, and therefore he never accuses anyone. On the contrary, he becomes increasingly attached to the Supreme Personality of Godhead because of his being purified by his suffering. Suffering, therefore, is also a process of purification. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says in this connection that one who has developed Krishna consciousness and who exists in love with Krishna is no longer subject to suffering and happiness under the laws of karma. Indeed, he is beyond karma. The Brahma Samhita says, Karmani nirdahati kintu chabhakti bhajam. Verse 54. A devotee is free from the reactions of his karma because he has taken to devotional service. The same principle is confirmed in Bhagavad Gita 14:26. Sagunam samititaitan brahma bhuyaya kalpate. One who is engaged in devotional service has already been freed from the reactions of his material karma, and thus he immediately becomes Brahma Bhuta, or transcendental. This is also expressed in Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam 1:21. Kshiyante chase karmani. Before attaining the stage of love, one becomes free from all the results of karma. The Lord is very kind and affectionate toward his devotees, and therefore a devotee, in any condition, is not subjected to the results of karma. A devotee never aspires for the heavenly planets. The heavenly planets, liberation, and hell are non-different for a devotee, for he does not discriminate between different positions in the material world. A devotee is always eager to return home back to Godhead and remain there as the Lord's associate. This ambition becomes increasingly fervent in his heart, and therefore he does not care about material changes in his life. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur comments that Maharaj Citraketu's being cursed by Parvati should be considered the mercy of the Lord. The Lord wanted Citraketu to return to Godhead as soon as possible, and therefore he terminated all the reactions of his past deeds. Acting through the heart of Parvati, the Lord, who is situated in everyone's heart, cursed Citraketu in order to end all his material reactions. Thus, Citraketu became Vitrasura in his next life and returned home back to Godhead. Sangsara chakra etasmin jantura jnana mohita brahmyan sukham cha dukham cha bhunkte sarvatra sarvada. Deluded by ignorance, the living entity wanders in the forests of this material world, enjoying the happiness and distress resulting from his past deeds, everywhere and at all times. Therefore, my dear mother, neither you nor I am to be blamed for this incident. Purport. As confirmed in Bhagavad Gita 3.27, Prakrite kriyamanani gunai karmani sarvasha ahankara vimudhatma kartaham iti manyate. The bewildered soul, under the influence of the three modes of material nature, thinks himself the doer of activities that are in actuality carried out by nature. Actually, a conditioned soul is completely under the control of material nature. Wandering here and there, always and everywhere, he is subjected to the results of his past deeds. This is carried out by the laws of nature, but one foolishly thinks himself the doer, which in fact he is not. To get free from the karma chakra, the wheel of the results of one's karma, one should take to bhakti marga, devotional service or Krishna consciousness. That is the only remedy. Sarva dharmam parityaja mamekam sharanam vraja. It's Bhagavad Gita 1866. Naivatmana paraschapi kartasyat sukadhukayo kartaram manyate pragya atmanam paramevaucha. In this material world, neither the living entity himself nor others, friends and enemies, are the cause of material happiness and distress. But because of gross ignorance, the living entity thinks that he and others are the cause. Purport. In this verse, the word agya is very significant. In the material world, all living entities are agya, they are ignorant, in different degrees. This ignorance continues very strongly in the mode of ignorance, presented by material nature. One must therefore promote himself to the stage of goodness through his character and behavior, and then gradually come to the transcendental platform, our adhokshaj platform, in which he realizes both his position and the position of others. Everything is done under the superintendence of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The process by which the results of action are ordained is called niyatam, always working. Guna pravaha etasmin kashapa kon vanugraha kasvargo naraka kova kim sukam dukhameva va. This material world resembles the waves of a constantly flowing river. Therefore, what is a curse and what is a favor? What are the heavenly planets and what are the hellish planets? What is actually happiness and what is actually distress? Because the waves flow constantly, none of them has an eternal effect. Purport. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur sings, Niche mayar vashe jacho bheshe kacho habudubo bhai. My dear living entities, within this material world, why are you being carried away by the waves of the modes of material nature? Jiva Krishna Das Evishvas Korleto Ardukanai. If the living entity tries to understand that he is an eternal servant of Krishna, there will no longer be misery for him. Krishna wants us to give up all other engagements and surrender unto him. If we do so, Where will the cause and effect of this material world be? There is nothing like cause and effect for the surrendered soul. Srila Vishwanath Chakrabarti Thakur says in this regard that being put into this material world is like being thrown into a mine of salt. If one falls into a mine of salt, he tastes only salt wherever he goes. Similarly, this material world is full of miseries. The so-called temporary happiness of the world is also misery, but in ignorance, we cannot understand this. That is the actual position. When one comes to his senses, when he becomes Krishna conscious, he is no longer concerned with the various conditions of this material world. He is not concerned with happiness or distress, curses or favors, or heavenly or hellish planets. He sees no distinction between them. Ekasrijati bhutani bhagavan atma mayaya esham bandham cha moksham cha sukham dukkam cha nishkala. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is one. Unaffected by the conditions of the material world, he creates all the conditioned souls by his own personal potency. Because of being contaminated by the material energy, the living entity is put into ignorance and thus into different conditions of bondage. Sometimes, by knowledge, the living entity is given liberation. In Sattvagun and Rajagun, he is subjected to happiness and distress. Purport. The question may be raised why the living entities are situated in different conditions and who has arranged this. The answer is that it has been done by the Supreme Personality of Godhead without anyone's help. The Lord has his own energies, parasya shaktir vividhaiva shruyate, and one of them, namely the external energy, creates the material world and the varieties of happiness and distress for the conditioned souls under the supervision of the Lord. The material world consists of the three modes of material nature, Sattvagun, Rajagun, and Tamagun. By Sattvagun, the Lord maintains the material world. By Rajagun, he creates it. And by Tamagun, he annihilates it. After the varieties of living entities are created, they are subject to happiness and distress according to their association. When they are in Sattvagun, the mode of goodness, they feel happiness. When in Rajagun, they are distressed. And when in Tamagun, they have no sense of what to do and what is right, they have no sense of what to do or what is right and wrong. Natasya kaschid daita pratipo nagyati bandhur na paro na chasva samasya sarvatra niranjanasya sukhe naragha kuta eva rosha. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is equally disposed toward all living entities. Therefore, no one is very dear to him, and no one is a great enemy for him. No one is his friend, and no one is his relative. Being unattached to the material world, he has no affection for so-called happiness or hatred for so-called he has no affection for so-called happiness or hatred for so-called distress. The two terms happiness and distress are relative. Since the Lord is always happy, for him there is no question of distress. Tatapi tat shakti visarga esham sukaya dukhaya hitaya bandhaya mokshaya chamritu janmano sharirinam sangsritaye vikalpate. Although the Supreme Lord is unattached to our happiness and distress according to karma, and although no one is his enemy or favorite, he creates pious and impious activities through the agency of his material potency. Thus, for the continuation of the materialistic way of life, he creates happiness and distress, good fortune and bad, bondage and liberation, birth and death. Purport. Although the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the ultimate doer of everything, and his original transcendental existence, he is not responsible for the happiness and distress or bondage and liberation of the conditioned souls. These are due to the results of the fruitive activities of the living entities within this material world. By the order of a judge, one person is released from jail and another is imprisoned. But the judge is not responsible, for the distress and happiness of these different people is due to their own activities. Although the government is ultimately the supreme authority, the justice is administered by the departments of the government, and the government is not responsible for the individual judgments. Therefore, the government is equal to all the citizens. Similarly, the Supreme Lord is neutral to everyone, but for the maintenance of law and order in his supreme government, but for the maintenance of law and order, his supreme government has various departments, which control the activities of the living entities. Another example given in this regard is that the lilies open or close because of the sunshine, and thus the bumblebees enjoy or suffer. But the sunshine and the sun globe are not responsible for the happiness and distress of the bumblebees. Ata prasadayena tvam shapamokshaya bhamini yanmanyase hyasadhuktam mamatat kshamyatam sati. O Mother, you are now unnecessarily angry, but since all my happiness and distress are destined by my past activities, I do not plead to be excused or relieved from your curse. Although what I have said is not wrong, please let whatever you think is wrong be pardoned. Purport. Being fully aware of how the results of one's karma accrue by the laws of nature, Citraketu did not want to be released from Parvati's curse. Nonetheless, he wanted to satisfy her because although his verdict was natural, she was displeased with him. As a matter of course, Maharaj Citraketu begged pardon from Parvati. Just seeing what verse we're reading up to. 24. Oh, we're finished. All right. So, tomorrow, I closed it. Let me just open it again to see what we're reading tomorrow. Tomorrow we will read about Lord Shiva talks to Parvati. And then we'll read the Falashruti about hearing about Citraketu. One is freed from bondage and goes back to Godhead. All right. And then what comes after this, I already forgot. It's chapter 18 about. Oh yeah. Then it's continuing the descendants of Aditi and Diti. It will be continuing on from chapter 6. All right. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Nitai Gaur Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaur Hari Bol, Nitai Gaur Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol. Jai Shishi Guru Gauranga Gandharvika Giridhari Shishi Radha Vinod Bihari Ju Ki Jai, Shri Govinda Gopinath Maran Mohan Ju Ki Jai, Nitila Pravishtam Vishnupad Ashtatara Shatashmad Shala Bhakti Vedanta Narayan Gosai Maharaj Shala Gurudev Ki Jai, Nitila Pravishtam Vishnupad Ashatara Shatashmad Shala Bhakti Vedanta Vaman Gosai Maharaj Ki Jai, Nitila Pravishtam Vishnupad Ashatara Shatashmad Shala Bhakti Vedanta Sai Maharaj Shala Prabhupada Ki Jai, Nitila Pravishtam Vishnupad Ashatara Shatashmad Shala Bhakti Vigyan Keshav Gosai Maharaj Ki Jai, Nitila Pravishtam Vishnupad Ashatara Shatashmad Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Gosai Prabhupada Ki Jai, Nitila Pravishta Maha-Bhagavat Srila Goksharas Babaji Maharaj Ki Jai, Nitila Pravishta Srila Satchidananda Bhakti Vinod Thakur Ki Jai, Nitila Pravishta Vaishnav Sarvabhauma Srila Jagannath Das Babaji Maharaj Ki Jai, Shri Rupanu Gauriya Guru Varga ki jai, Shri Rupa Sanatan Bhatta Raghunath, Shri Jiva Gopal Padadash Raghunath Shara Gosai Prabhu ki jai, Shri Sarup Damodar Rai Ramananda Rishi Gaur Parshad Vrinda ki jai, Namachay Shlahairas Thakur ki jai, Prem se kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda, Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki jai, Shri Kshetra Mandal Gaur Mandal Vraja Mandal Mathura Vrindavan Dham ki jai, Sarva Abhishta Pradata Giriraj Maharaj ki jai, Shri Radha Kund Shyama Kund ki jai, Shri Muna Devi Ganga Devi ki jai, Shri Tulsi Maharani Vrinda Devi ki jai, Shri Bhakti Devi ki jai, Shri Purnamasi Yoga Maya ki jai, Shri Gopeshwar Mahadev ki jai, Shri Harinam Sankirtan ki jai, Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai, Samagata Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki jai, Shri Nitai Gaur Preman, Shri Indira Akadashi Titi ki jai, Titi Palan Kari Bhakta Vrinda ki jai, Shri Nitai Gaur Premanande Hari Hari Bo. Vrindai Tulsi Devai, Priyai Keshavashacha, Krishna Bhakti Pradadevi, Sattvatai Namo Namaha, Vancha Kalpa Turubhyascha, Kripa Sandubhya Evacha, Patitanam Pavanebhyo, Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Dandavat Pranams. See you all tomorrow. Jai Shri Radhe.